Welcome to Vanguard, where humans aren't the underdogs. We're the endgame. Enjoy the journey. The twin suns of Calaris 4 hung low over the desolate horizon, casting blood-red light across the scorched sands of the Sunblood Arena. Once a sacred ground for ritual combat, it had long devolved into a theater of cruelty where politics and execution merged into one grotesque spectacle. The crowd roared, a sea of 20,000 beings from a dozen species, all gathered for one purpose: to witness the royal traitor torn limb from limb. Princess Saya Tanalis stood at the center of the arena, her form bathed in crimson light. Four thick power cables stretched her wrists and ankles outward, each one pulsing with bioelectric current. Her royal garb had been stripped, replaced with tattered rags that clung to her bruised, violet skin. Her silver hair, once a crown of pride, now fell in tangled strands over hollow cheeks. But it was her eyes, those unblinking amber eyes, that held the crowd's attention. Not fear, not despair, disappointment. Above her, suspended from an ornate platform, stood Prince Dacier Tanales, her elder brother, her accuser, her executioner. Dressed in ceremonial bone-white robes, his voice echoed across the arena through amplified projection. Today, he declared, we deliver justice to a traitor, not for rebellion, not for treason, but for the most vile of crimes, empathy. The crowd hissed and jeered. Among the Tanzi elite, emotional connection was viewed not only as weakness, but as genetic contamination. Saya had broken the ancient code, shown compassion to the colonies, mercy to the labor caste, and kindness to non-Tanzi species. For that, she would die. Are the quartering beasts ready? Dacier asked, a cruel smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Confirmed, a technician's voice echoed. At the arena's four corners, circular hatches opened. From each emerged a quadri-beast, biomechanical monstrosities that resembled massive metallic canines crafted for both spectacle and agony. Their joints were synthetic muscles flexing as they locked eyes on their target, each beast tethered to one of Saya's restraints. The technician's voice came again. Quartering sequence calibrated, awaiting activation. Saya closed her eyes. The shame was not in death, but in dying like this in front of her people, like an animal. Then came the commotion. The eastern gate of the arena shuddered under impact. Screams erupted. Guards scrambled. Metal screamed as blast doors buckled inward. And then silence. A single figure stepped forward, herded by nervous guards with stunned prods who dared not touch him. A human. He stood nearly 2 meters tall, bare-chested, covered in cuts and dried blood. Chains bound his wrists and ankles, but he moved as if he bore no weight at all. Muscles like forged steel rippled with each step. Branded into the side of his neck were 3 characters: RX-12, and beneath it a warning: wild unit. Use caution. Dacier's smile widened. Perfect. Our latest weapon arrives on cue. He addressed the crowd, arms raised. Behold human strength fused with predator DNA from the extinct Halgrim. Before we execute the Princess Witness, true power. Technicians hesitated. Sir, 5 handlers are already dead. We should release him, Dacier barked. The chains fell. RX-12 stood still. Saya's breath caught. Something in his posture, familiar. A shadow of something lost. Any final words, sister? Dacier mocked. Saya locked eyes with him. You've already lost. You just don't know it yet. Begin with her right arm. A mechanical whine as the cable on her right wrist began to tighten. Pain exploded down her arm until it didn't. A thunderclap. Sparks. Screams. RX-12 had moved. One of the quadribeasts was missing its head. Guards rushed forward, too slow. RX-12's claws, genetically enhanced, ripped through armor. One guard flew 30 feet, another crumpled with a shattered spine. The neural inhibitors activated. High-pitched waves pulsed through the arena, meant to shut down his brain. RX-12 roared a sound that silenced the entire stadium. He staggered, then straightened. The rage didn't break him, it forged him. 3 more guards fell, blood sprayed. The other quadribeast lunged, jaws open. He caught one midair, crushed its head in his hand, and used its twitching body to bludgeon the second. The last two charged. RX-12 tore the power cables from Saya's limbs and yanked them, redirecting the beast to slam into each other. He landed beside her. Eyes met. Her breath caught. No fear. Recognition. "Kill them both!" Dacier screamed. RX-12 stepped between her and the approaching soldiers. Saya whispered, "Stop." And he did. The entire arena froze. 20,000 souls watched a monster go still at a whisper. Saya reached forward, her bruised fingers brushing his blood-drenched hair. His eyes closed. A tremble ran through his frame. For the first time in his broken memory, there was no command, no screaming rage, just peace. Daisy's voice echoed again, trembling now. "What sorcery is this?" Saya stood tall, arms around RX-12 like a guardian spirit. "This ends now, Dossier. You wanted a weapon. I found a protector." The escape that followed was chaos. Explosions, alarms, pursuit. But in the smoke and blood they vanished, princess and beast, rebel and guardian. The world would never be the same. The howling winds of the Calaris 4 desert tore across the scorched landscape, swirling dust around the jagged rocks of the northern wastes. Somewhere amid that wasteland, hidden beneath the fractured remnants of a long-abandoned comms relay station, two fugitives found uneasy shelter. Saya Tenales sat cross-legged near the faint glow of a portable heat emitter, her hands trembling slightly despite her efforts to project calm. The adrenaline of the arena had faded. Now came the ache, bruises, torn muscles, fractured ribs. But the worst pain wasn't physical. It was the sound of the crowd, her people cheering for her execution. Across the room, the human known only as RX-12 paced in slow, deliberate arcs, his body still humming with residual energy. Shirtless, scarred, still smeared in blood, he moved like a creature barely contained. But he wasn't attacking. He wasn't growling. He wasn't even looking at her. He was remembering. "Do you know me?" Saya asked softly. He paused. "I don't know," he murmured. His voice was deeper than she expected, low-weathered, strained. "But when they pulled you apart, I felt it, like something tearing inside me, something ancient." She stood wincing and walked to him, slowly, carefully. "You reacted before they touched me, before they even gave the command." He nodded, not meeting her gaze. "I've heard voices in my head for as long as I can remember. Screaming, orders, pain. But when I saw you, they stopped. All I heard was silence. It terrified me." Saya reached out, not to touch him, but to show her empty hands. "Do you remember the memory temple?" A flicker. Just a glint of confusion or maybe recognition crossed his face. She pressed on. "It was the day I turned 7. My brother and I were taken to the Temple of Luminous. There the memory stone judged us. He touched it first, deep purple light like everyone expected. Cold logic. Strategic alignment. Then I touched it, and it turned blue," RX-12 whispered. His voice had changed, softer, distant. Her eyes widened. "How do you know that?" I do, but I don't know why." Saya felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. That color hadn't appeared in 10,000 years. Blue meant empathy, emotional resonance, a trait long considered a weakness in Tanzi royalty. She walked to a side locker, pulling out an old data slate. It buzzed weakly, flickering to life. The screen showed two children in ceremonial garb, one with silver hair, the other with short black curls and dark eyes. "You were there," she said. "That boy was you. My father introduced me to the secret projects beneath the temple. You were not a prince, not a citizen. You were a subject." RX-12 stared at the image, unmoving. Then slowly he reached beneath the torn straps that hung around his neck and pulled out a weathered cord. A crude, ring-like object made from desert crab shell, childishly carved. Saya's breath hitched. She reached into her robes and retrieved a second identical ring. "We made these," she whispered. "You were crying. I gave you mine first." He looked between the rings, then at her. "That day you gave me something, and then they took you away." Saya nodded, voice tightening. and they erased everything from your mind, everything but pain. For a long moment, neither spoke. The heater pulsed softly, casting long shadows along the concrete walls. Then suddenly RX-12 sat down as if his knees could no longer bear the weight of realization. "I'm not a man," he said. "I was made." "No," Saya replied firmly, sitting beside him. "You were engineered. But what you did in that arena, no programming could cause that. You chose me. Not because of some command, but because something inside you remembered I was worth saving." He said nothing. She leaned her head gently against his shoulder. He didn't flinch, just stared at the rings. "Your brother tried to kill you because of who you are," RX-12 finally said. Saya nodded. "He always envied me, but after the memory stone turned blue, he hated me." I used to hate too," RX-12 said, "but I don't feel that now. I feel conflicted," she offered. "No," he said. "I feel whole, like a door opened, and behind it I'm waiting." They sat in silence as the wind howled above them, the stars slowly emerging in the cracked dome overhead. Far away on the capital world of Tony Prime, Prince Dossier Tanalis stood in a dim chamber facing the central projection core. He watched the arena footage again the moment when RX-12 stopped mid-rampage at the princess's whisper. His jaw clenched. "Bring me the lead researcher," he growled. Moments later, a frail man in white entered, bowing nervously. "You told me RX-12 was incapable of loyalty." "Yes, Your Highness. I swear he was bred for instinct, only no memory, no empathy, no emotional anchor." "Then explain this," Dossier snapped, replaying the moment Saya touched RX-12's face. The scientist swallowed hard. "It's impossible. Unless, unless what?" There were rumors, he whispered, that the empathy gene, her resonance, could override the suppression, but that would mean that she's still bonded to him, Dossier hissed. "She's not a weakness, she's his trigger." He turned away, eyes cold. "Then we must sever the bond, permanently." Back in the shelter, RX-12, no, Rylon, the name Saya had started calling him, sat beside her, the ring still clutched in his hand. He didn't understand everything. Not yet. But in that moment he made a quiet promise. No one would take her from him again. The subterranean facility was buried beneath layers of stone history and regret. Officially, it didn't exist. But Saya Tanalis had always known it was there. Her father once whispered its location during a rare moment of truth, one of the last they'd shared before his death. They had traveled for 2 days through the mountains of northern Calaris 4. With limited supplies, they moved at night to avoid Dossier's orbital scans. Saya walked with determined silence, guiding them along ancient terrain. Behind her, Rylon moved like a shadow, his senses still on edge, his body half-triggered into combat awareness at every unfamiliar sound. When they reached a ridge flanked by stone monoliths, Saya knelt beside a cracked boulder and brushed away dust to reveal a recessed panel. With a single drop of blood drawn from her fingertip, she activated the ancestral seal. A section of the cliffside shimmered stone melting away like smoke, revealing a vertical shaft lined with alloy steps leading into utter blackness. "Welcome, Princess Saya Tanalis," a synthetic voice whispered from nowhere. "Identity confirmed. Vault access granted." Rylon hesitated at the threshold. "This place feels..." He paused, sniffing the air. "Dead, but not empty." Saya gave him a solemn nod. "It's where the old truths were buried alive." They descended in silence. The air was cold metallic and laced with the faint scent of ozone. As they reached the core chamber, ancient systems flickered to life. Dim blue lights blinked like slow heartbeats. The room was circular, lined with dusty consoles and inert stasis tubes. At the center stood a single control station with a tansy crest embedded in obsidian glass. Saya approached and placed her palm on the interface. A soft chime responded. "Welcome, Genetic Royal. Project Beast Carrier data initializing." The room hummed with sudden energy. Holograms burst into the air, spinning diagrams, DNA strands, combat footage, neural scans. At the center of it all was a still image. A child, no older than 4, suspended in a biotube, eyes wide, terrified, skin pale and smooth with dark hair floating in the fluid like seaweed. Designation RX-12. Rylon stopped breathing. That's me. Saya didn't answer immediately. She was watching the screen with quiet fury. She knew this would be hard. She didn't expect the ache in her chest to sting quite this much. You were grown here, she finally said. Built from genetic donors collected across Earth's refugee sectors. But not just human, your genome was hybridized. With what his voice was tight low. The Halgrim, she said, an extinct predator species. We wiped them out over a century ago. They were too dangerous, too fast, too uncontrollable. The High Council preserved some genetic samples for classified projects. Like this one. He looked at his hands, flexed them. The strength, the pain, the instinct, it all made horrifying sense now. I'm not human, he said. Saya shook her head. No, Rylon, you're more. She accessed a secondary file. A video began to play. A younger version of him, maybe 7, sat on the floor of a sterile observation chamber. His eyes were glassy, blank. Wounds covered his arms, half-healed and fresh. In the background, scientists whispered into data recorders noting pain thresholds, stimulus reactions. Then another child entered the room. A girl with silver hair and an elegant gait, no older than 5. She carried a small piece of fruit and knelt before the boy. She didn't speak. She simply extended her hand. Their fingers touched. Suddenly, the monitoring equipment behind them spiked neural activity, heart rate, cognitive flare-ups, all off the charts. Saya froze the frame. That's us. Rylon stared. I don't remember this. You weren't meant to, she said. After this encounter, the council ordered a full neural purge. They were afraid the bond made you unstable. Why would they let you near me in the first place? Because my father allowed it. He didn't trust Dacier. And when the memory stone chose me when it glowed blue, he knew I'd need someone who could survive what was coming. Someone who wasn't bred for cruelty. Saya accessed another file, this time a brain scan with comparative overlays. This is your rage response. Most of your combat triggers pass through the limbic system. That's normal, but your enhancements channel it through the prefrontal cortex first. That's not normal. What does it mean? It means your fury isn't feral. It's focused, directed. You don't rage at random. You rage for a reason. For you, he said slowly. Yes, she replied. They designed you as a weapon, but you became something else. He took a step back from the console. You don't understand. I've killed people. I've torn them apart. That arena, it wasn't the first time. You protected me, she said firmly. And you held back when you could have lost control. That's the difference. That's your choice. He shook his head. No one ever gave me a choice. I am, she said. For a moment there was silence. Deep, heavy, not of absence but weight. The weight of truth pressing down from years of manipulation. She moved closer. Her voice softened. They wanted a monster, but they built a protector. My protector. You make me feel like I'm not broken, he whispered. You're not. His eyes found hers. Then why do I still hear it? Saya tilted her head. Hear what? The beast. The scream inside, it never left. She didn't flinch. She stepped forward, closing the gap, and placed a hand on his chest. Then don't silence it, she said. Shape it. Let it howl, but let it serve something greater. Let it serve us. He felt the warmth of her hand through his skin, through scars and altered muscle. Something in him cracked some wall that had been erected not by science, but by survival. He nodded once slowly. Then show me who I am. Saya turned back to the console. Let's finish it. They accessed the final logs, project conclusions, termination orders, and one final encrypted note. It bore her father's signature. If you are reading this, daughter, it means the safeguards have failed. Dacier has ascended. I pray Rylon has found you in time. He is not a weapon. He is your flame. Carry it wisely. Rylon stepped forward and placed his hand over hers on the console. They stood that way for a moment, 2 survivors forged by betrayal, now armed with truth. Behind them, the hollow image of RX-12 flickered out. For the first time in his life, Rylon didn't feel like a designation. He felt like a person. 3 days had passed since the truth about Rylon's origin had been unearthed. 3 days since Saya saw her fate as more than survival, she now saw a revolution. Nestled deep within the rust-colored canopy of the Crimson Forest, the once-forgotten Royal Hunting Lodge had become their base of operations. Designed centuries ago as a private retreat for emperors and dignitaries, it now hosted a different kind of royalty, rebel scientists and soldiers without a flag. The lodge stood cloaked in vines and silence shielded by residual stealth fields and the old-world tech that Dossier never bothered to dismantle. It was the perfect place to spark a rebellion. Saya stood at the balcony of the command hall, gazing out at the scattered groups training beneath the crimson trees. Makeshift barracks were being erected, watchtowers reactivated, and encrypted transmitters set to loop recruitment beacons. Rylan joined her, his footsteps heavy but steady. His presence still drew stares, some of awe, others of fear. After all, stories of his arena rampage had spread like wildfire. Most believed he was barely more than a beast, but the woman beside him knew better. "They're afraid of me," he said without looking at her. "They're afraid of what you represent," Saya replied. "Power without a leash, violence with choice." "And what am I to you?" he asked. She turned, hope. Inside the main hall, Kakak stood hunched over a holo map displaying the Tansy star systems. A former military tactician with scars deeper than most could imagine KX had served Saya's father and now served his daughter not because of loyalty, but because of belief. "We've secured 5 outer colonies," he reported, "and the Mineral Guild has pledged 32 freighters and over 200 armed workers." Saya nodded. "What of the Medic Consortium?" "Officially neutral," KX grunted. "Unofficially, they're smuggling us med packs and trauma units. Dacier's forced experimentation programs cost them too many good doctors. They won't say it, but they're with us." "What about the fleet?" Rilan asked from the shadows. KX grimaced. "Most of the High Navy remains loyal to the Crown, or rather to Dossier's paychecks. But independent patrol ships on the fringes, they're listening." "And the public," divided Saya said. "Some still believe Dossier's propaganda. Others fear war. But many have lost someone to his labs, his purges, or his silence." She leaned forward over the holomap. "We don't need the whole empire to rise. We only need to light the fire." That night, as the moonlight filtered through the broken roof tiles of the lodge, Rylan trained alone in the courtyard. His body moved in precise arcs, controlled strikes, rapid counters, defensive transitions. Every muscle obeyed, every breath was measured. Saya watched from a distance, arms folded. She let him finish before speaking. "You still train like you're expecting a cage." "I am," he said. "Every moment of calm feels borrowed." She stepped closer. "Then let's stop borrowing." He looked at her, confusion plain. "I want to help you master it, not suppress it, not fear it, but own it." "You mean the rage?" "No," she said, reaching out. "I mean you, all of you." They returned to the meditation chamber, a relic of the lodge's spiritual roots. There on cracked stone, they sat cross-legged, facing one another. Between them, a single flame hovered inside a glass orb. It pulsed with heat and silence. "Close your eyes," she said, "and listen." He obeyed. To what, he asked after a moment. "To yourself, beneath the scars, beneath the blood, beneath the voice that says you were made, not born." He inhaled. "All I hear is the scream, the one that comes before I lose control. Then scream back." He snapped his eyes open. "What? You've always run from the beast. What if you don't? What if you meet it?" He closed his eyes again, but this time he leaned in. The scream returned, distorted, primal, soaked in pain. But he didn't turn away. He walked toward it. Inside his mind, the memory of the arena flickered. Not the roar of the crowd, not the blood, but her voice, Saya's voice, cutting through the chaos. "Stop." He had obeyed then, not because he was ordered, but because he chose to. And now within the depths of his psyche, the beast waited, not snarling, not lunging, watching. He reached out, and it didn't bite. When he opened his eyes again, tears rimmed the corners. Saya smiled softly. That's step one. The days that followed were filled with movement. Resistance cells across the system began synchronizing. Intelligence flowed through smuggled channels. Colonies that once bowed in silence now whispered rebellion. Saya spent hours each day with envoys alien races once deemed inferior by Tanzi law, now offering aid, weaponry, and information. She sat in council with mercenaries, nobles, and priests. She didn't rule, she listened. And in every meeting, Rylon stood at her back, not as a threat, but as a symbol. To some, he represented wrath incarnate, to others, salvation, but to her, he was balance. One evening, KX pulled her aside. You sure about this? About what? The way people look at him. Some think you've tamed a monster. Some think you're sleeping next to a bomb. I'm not taming anything, she said. I'm walking beside a man who was never given a path. Only chains. KX grunted. Fair, but even good weapons need triggers. What's his? Saya looked across the hall at Rylon, deep in conversation with a young engineer who showed no fear. He doesn't need a trigger anymore, she said. He has a reason. That night in the garden behind the lodge, where bioluminescent flowers shimmered under the twin moons, Rylon found her alone. You weren't at the command briefing, he said. I needed air. He walked to her side. Bad news. No, just wait, leadership, responsibility, the future. He looked up. When we win, what do you want to build? She turned to him. Something no Tanzi ruler ever has. Empathy. No, she said. A legacy. One not built on fear or blood. One that begins with truth and ends with choice. He stepped closer. And you want me in that legacy? She met his gaze. You are the start of it. He brushed a strand of silver hair from her face. I still hear the beast, he said. She placed his hand over her heart. Then teach it to hear me. They kissed under the glow of foreign stars, no longer rebels or royalty, but something more dangerous. Partners. And above them, the skies of the empire cracked, one whisper, one defector, one heartbeat at a time. The Tanzi imperial capital was not built for beauty, though it possessed a cold architectural grandeur. It was built to intimidate. A labyrinth of titanium-veined skyscrapers and reinforced obsidian walls spread out like ribs around the beating heart of the empire, the Palace of the Sun, a monolithic structure that towered above all, encased in golden alloy, and wrapped in energy fields that pulsed like a second skin. Inside those walls, Dacier controlled everything. Information, fear, bloodlines, and now children. In a darkened war tent miles away, Saya traced her gloved finger across a projected 3D map, the plan unfolding before three pairs of tense eyes. We're not getting a second shot at this, she said, voice steady. Once we move, it's all or nothing. KX, pacing beside her like a wolf with too many scars, growled under his breath. You're talking about breaking into the most secure structure in the quadrant, like we're picking flowers in a field. We're not picking flowers, Saya replied. We're burning the field to ash. Rylon watched her from the shadows, silent but alert. His presence alone brought weight to the room. Since the raid on the research facility, he hadn't spoken much. Something had shifted in him. His fury was colder now, more precise. KX jabbed at the map. Sublevel. That's suicide. Even with a cloaked approach, the palace has seismic sensors, atmospheric sniffers, retinal scanners. I was born there, Saya cut in. I trained inside those halls. I know their blind spots better than Dacier himself. And the sub-levels? They're old, pre-unification era. I still have the maintenance overrides. The codes were buried in my neurochip and never scrubbed. Rylon finally spoke, his voice low and resonant. He's using the children. Saya's jaw tensed. Yes, they're not just hybrids anymore. He's accelerating the line. He's crafting a new generation, perfectly obedient, emotionally void, genetically optimized. For what KX hissed. Saya met his gaze. For conquest. A heavy silence fell. No one questioned the plan again. 3 days later, a solar storm brewed overhead, blanketing the capital's orbital sensors and interference. It was the narrow window they needed. A stolen service skimmer glided through the city's underlayers, hugging the steel bones of the undercity. On board, Saya, Rylon, KX, and Vren, a young tech specialist with more implants than limbs, sat in silence. Saya watched the walls blur past. Her mind drifted to memories she hadn't summoned in years. Golden banquets, hollow laughter, the cold hum of the breeding labs beneath the palace. She had escaped this place once. Now she returned not as a daughter, but as a destroyer. We're nearing the insertion point, Vren said, checking the pulse of his data lines. The skimmer banked hard, entering an ancient waste tunnel that hadn't seen activity in centuries. It reeked of rust, decay, and forgotten sins. This is insane, KX muttered. Insane is letting him finish his work, Saya replied. They docked in silence. Dressed in stolen service uniforms, they disembarked weapons hidden beneath their clothes. The entrance was an old purification chamber, long since decommissioned. Rylon pulled the grate free with his bare hands. They moved quickly, silently. As they crept through maintenance corridors, Saya's memory served as their compass. Turn left past the Emperor's reliquary, right beneath the Hall of Echoes. She recalled childhood games in these passages, games she later learned were tests. They had always trained her for obedience, not freedom. But she had learned rebellion instead. The elevator shaft loomed ahead, a narrow column of steel and silence. Saya approached the panel, pulled a small neural spike from her wrist, and slotted it into the override port. It blinked green. KX exhaled by the stars. Rides here, Vren muttered. They descended. The lab floor was colder than ice. It was sterile, vast, and quiet, like a cathedral built to worship control. Rows of glass pods lined the chamber, each housing a child suspended in stasis. Their faces were serene, unaware of what they were becoming. Some looked human, others didn't. Rylon stopped in front of a pod that held a boy with skin like obsidian and eyes like burning coal. Saya halted before another, a girl with silver veins and haunting green eyes. She looks like you, Rylon murmured. Saya's voice cracked. They used my genome, spliced with programmable loyalty genes. These children, they're not clones, they're weapons, each one more precise than the last. They don't even know who they are, Rylon said. They're not supposed to, she whispered. Identity breeds questions. Suddenly, Vren's fingers froze over his data pad. We've got motion, guard teams, multiple signatures. Too early, KX cursed. They must have sensed the power draw from the elevator, Saya said. Vren sealed this level. Buy us 5 minutes. I can lock them out for 4, he muttered. Saya turned to KX, set the charges, every core junction and cryo-stabilizer. We bring this entire nest down. KX nodded grimly and got to work. Alarms began to scream. Rylon flexed his fingers, his claws extended, gleaming under the red warning lights. Saya handed him a backup plasma pistol. No heroics, she said. I'm not the heroic type, he replied. Gunfire echoed from the elevator shaft. The immortal guard had arrived, 7-foot brutes with neural firewalls, shock blood systems, and zero hesitation. They opened fire. Saya and Rylon returned it with deadly efficiency. He was a blur of claws and teeth. She was all precision, kneecapping guards before delivering fatal shots. KX launched 2 grenades that tore the far wall apart. Vren got hit. Shoulder wound. Saya dragged him behind cover and tossed KX a stim pack. We're done here, KX shouted. Charges are primed. Saya activated her comm. Extraction mark coordinates and punched the override. Above, rebel operatives intercepted the palace's defense grid, causing a citywide blackout. The energy shield sputtered and fell. A cloaked transport dropped like a hawk. Saya helped Vren to his feet, arm around his waist. Rylon covered the retreat, roaring as he tackled 2 guards into a control panel. They made it to the courtyard, an old garden, now forgotten vines twisting through cracked stone. Their evac ship hovered low. A plasma bolt clipped Saya's side. She cried out but stayed upright. Rylon grabbed her. You're not falling here. They leapt aboard. The hatch slammed shut. Engines screamed. As the ship rose, a massive shock wave rippled across the ground. The underground lab imploded, sending a geyser of dust and light into the night sky. The hybrid pods, the twisted research, gone. Aboard the Axiom hours later, the silence was thick. Saya lay in the medbay, painkillers dulling the fire in her side. Rylon sat beside her, arm across his knee, eyes never leaving her face. You stayed, she whispered. Where else would I be? He said quietly. She smiled through the haze. We hit him hard. Not hard enough, KX said, entering with a data pad. We intercepted a broadcast. He's not hiding. He's calling us terrorists. Play it, Saya said. The screen lit up. Dacier's image, flawless and unbothered, appeared. His voice oozed calculated calm. To the citizens of the Tanzi Empire, terrorists struck our capital tonight. They destroyed crucial research meant to protect us all. They believe chaos is strength. I assure you order will be restored and retribution will be absolute. The feed cut. Saya's face hardened. He's rattled. KX scrolled through the latest military movements. He's already deployed the Nova Legion, martial lockdown on 5 core systems. We exposed his secret, Raylan said. Now he'll try to silence the entire galaxy. Then we make it louder, Saya said. He wants fear. Let's give him a reason to be afraid. And in the dark void between stars, rebellion kindled into wildfire. The Axiom drifted in high orbit over the scorched moon Pelion 4. Its hull bruised by a recent skirmish, its crew restless and sleepless. The broadcast from Dacier had changed everything. They were no longer shadows, no longer a whisper in the dark. The rebellion now had a face, and the Empire had placed a bounty on it. That face was Saya, and that made every rebel world a target. We've received confirmation, KX said, his voice grim as he stared at the tactical table. The Nova Legion has begun strikes on border colonies, refugee outposts, medical relays. No distinction, no mercy. Saya stood beside him, her wound tightly bandaged, her eyes harder than steel. How many dead? 6,000 on Iretha Station, most burned in their sleep. Rylon didn't speak. He simply clenched his clawed fists and turned away. Every time the rebellion took a step forward, the Empire responded with a wave of annihilation. Dacier was lashing out not with strategy, but with vengeance. Where's the next target, Saya asked. KX hesitated. They're moving on Veritin Prime. That's where we pulled our first hybrid defector, where your people started to believe. Then we don't let it fall. You want to defend it, KX asked. With what our fleet scattered, supplies are strained. We've got maybe 15 warships, and most of them are patched with hope and duct tape. Saya placed a hand on the table. We draw a line here. Now, if we keep running, we lose everything we've built. If we fight, we lose lives. But if we do nothing, we lose the war. Vryn limped into the room, his arm in a sling. You're all thinking too small. We don't need to win the space battle. We just need to stop the ground assault. KX turned to him. You volunteering, kid? Damn right I am. 2 days later, the battle for Veritin Prime began. The rebel fleet emerged from hyperspace in a chaotic, asymmetrical formation. Part tactic, part necessity. They lacked the clean, razor-sharp coordination of Dacier's Nova Legion, but what they lacked in discipline, they made up for in unpredictability. Saya stood on the bridge of the Axiom, flanked by Rilanon and KX. Before them stretched a planet wreathed in smoke. Below, flashes of ground fire lit up the continents. Veritin's defense grid was already half crippled. We're late, KX said. No, Saya replied. We're right on time to save what's left. The Axiom dove into the upper atmosphere, its plasma cannons roaring to life. Rebel fighters peeled off, intercepting the black-armored Nova ships. The sky turned into a storm of fire and contrails. Below on the surface, the real fight began. Rylon, Saya, KX, and 100 rebel shock troopers dropped into the Alaris district, a civilian hub now swarming with Nova enforcers. The enemy soldiers were clean, efficient, and merciless, executing civilians as warnings, torching shelters to flush out resistance. But they didn't expect Rylon. He landed like a meteor claws, slashing through composite armor, eyes glowing with restrained fury. Saya followed behind, a whirlwind of calculated violence, dropping guards with precise shots, shouting orders into her comm. Hold the bridge, she yelled. Protect the transports. KX led a squad through a collapsed building, reactivating a dormant railgun battery buried under rubble. With a sonic boom, the railgun fired, shredding a Nova dropship mid-descent. The crowd of refugees cheered as flame and debris rained from the sky. Hope flickered. But Dacier had one more card. From orbit, a massive vessel broke through the clouds, the Imperial dreadnought Seraphis. Its hull stretched like a floating city and from its belly dropped the Executor-class unit's elite bioweapons bred from the same line as R'hllon, men but warped and enhanced. They fell like spears, smashing into the streets, rising from craters, with mechanical grace and eyes that burned red. One of them, taller than R'hllon, plated in chrome armor, locked onto Saya from across the plaza. "It's me they want," R'hllon growled. "No," Saya said, lifting her rifle. "It's both of us." The fight that followed was chaos incarnate. R'hllon lunged at the Executor, slashing with claws that sparked against reinforced plating. The creature countered with a blow that sent him flying into a wall. Saya peppered it with plasma bolts, aiming for the gaps in its armor. KX joined from above, lobbing an EMP grenade that momentarily staggered the creature. But it wasn't enough. The Executor charged faster than expected and drove a blade into KX's side. He went down with a grunt. KX Saya screamed. R'hllon rose, fury ignited. He tackled the creature, ripping through its faceplate, exposing circuitry and bone. With a final roar, he drove his claws through its core, tearing it apart. The Executor collapsed. Saya rushed to KX's side. He was pale, bleeding heavily. "I told you. I hate these damn hero moments," he muttered. "You'll be fine," she said, tears forming. "You always lie beautifully." He passed out. Hours later, the Axiom hovered over Veritin's capital. The battle was won. The cost was catastrophic. 3 rebel cruisers had been destroyed. Half the surface was ash. But the Nova Legion had retreated. And more importantly, the galaxy had seen it happen. Across independent systems, intercepted footage spread like wildfire, images of civilians saved, of rebel fighters giving their lives, of Saya bleeding on the front lines beside her people. The rebellion was no longer a whisper, it was a scream. In the medbay, KX stabilized. In the command center, Saya stood before a hollow projection of the galaxy, red zones marking Empire control, green zones rebel strongholds. "We bled today," she said, voice quiet. R'hllon stood beside her, arms crossed. "But for the first time, we made him bleed too. And he'll come back worse," R'hllon warned. "He always does." "Then we be ready." Far away in the Palace of the Sun Desier, watched the footage in silence. His hands trembled just slightly. "She's not a symbol," he whispered. "She's a reckoning." He turned to his scientists. "Release the Primaris line. Begin phase Omega." They hesitated. "But sir, they're unstable." Daisy's eyes burned. "So am I." They called it the Night of Iron Rain, the moment the galaxy realized the rebellion wasn't dying. It was evolving. At 0400 standard hours, without a formal declaration or warning salvo, Operation Scorchlight was launched. It was brutal, coordinated, swift, and it wasn't about symbolic strikes anymore. It was about breaking the spine of the Tanzi Empire's war machine. Under the command of Saya, the rebellion hit 16 targets across 3 sectors in a single synchronized wave: shipyards, cloning vaults, relay towers, and even deep-orbit black sites the Empire had denied existed for decades. It was chaos turned into doctrine, and at the center of it all stood R'hllon, silent, bloody, tireless. In the Duraxis Drydock's home of the Empire's Dreadnought Forge, R'hllon's claws tore through steel and flesh alike. His team of shock infiltrators planted antimatter charges beneath the quantum scaffolds as alarms screamed overhead. As the guards poured in, he activated his helmet comm. Package secured, extraction in 3 minutes. Explosions rocked the structure before the reply could come. Above them, the rebel ship Halcyon broke through orbital defense, laying cover fire with such fury it lit the night sky orange. Elsewhere in the scorched deserts of Tarna, Saya personally led the assault on Facility Omega-9 and off-the-books genetic black site. What they found there left hardened soldiers sick and silent. Rows upon rows of children, half human, half synthetic, suspended in forced neural programming. Their minds overwritten, their memories scrubbed, their voices silenced. "We were going to be next," Saya whispered. She pulled the main reactor offline and set the charges herself. No one stopped her. The facility burned. The Empire was reeling. Their death toll climbed. Their loyalists began to question. Their officers grew paranoid. For the first time in decades, cracks appeared in the golden mask of the Tanzi regime. But victory had its cost. Too many names were whispered in morning halls. Too many ships didn't make it home, and the pain of loss dug deep into the bones of every rebel still breathing. Even Relon. After Diraxis, he spent 2 hours alone in a dark corridor, hands shaking not from fear, but from the growing weight of what he'd become. He no longer flinched at blood. He didn't even blink when a child hybrid turned on them. He just reacted. Saya found him there. "You don't talk to anyone anymore," she said quietly. Rylon didn't look up. Talking doesn't stop war. No, she agreed, but forgetting who we are does. He finally looked at her. "I don't know what I am anymore." She stepped forward, placed a hand on his chest, right over the scar where the implant used to be. "You're not a weapon, you're the consequence." In the underground city of Black Hollow, rebel leaders gathered for the first true High Command assembly. Not a war council, but a vision session, a reckoning. Saya stood at the center, her uniform stained from the last strike, her voice hoarse from days without sleep. And yet she radiated control. "Daisy is preparing something darker," she said. "The Primaris line, enhanced hybrids fully conscious, fully weaponized, and bred for loyalty." The room shifted uncomfortably. KX, still walking with it, Kane grunted. "You think we haven't seen monsters? We've fought everything they've thrown at us." "This is different," Yaya said. "This is personal. They're using my DNA, my mind patterns. They're making a shadow version of me." Someone asked the obvious. "Then what's the plan?" Saya didn't blink. "We cut off the head." The plan was insanity on paper. Infiltrate the Sunspire Dossier's central command node, the most fortified structure in Imperial space. It hovered above Arcanus Prime, protected by orbital weapons platforms, encrypted AI firewalls, and legions of loyalists. "Arcanus isn't a fortress," Saya said. "It's a prison, one that we built for ourselves when we thought fear was power. We burn it down or we let it cage the galaxy forever." A vote was called. Every hand rose. The fleet gathered in the Zentar Nebula, cloaked by ion storms and EM interference. Dozens of ships, new and old. Refitted freighters alongside stolen destroyers. Their banners weren't unified, but their resolve was. Saya, Rylan, KX, Vren all stood before the command bridge screen as the Sunspire came into view. It gleamed like a false god, arrogant, unyielding. Rylan cracked his neck. "Let's see if gods bleed." The assault began with silence. No declarations, no grand speeches, just a fleet rising out of the nebula like vengeful ghosts. Pulse cannons fired. Torpedo bays screamed. The outer defenses crumbled under the sudden pressure of a dozen simultaneous boarding strikes. Saya led one. Rylon led another. The interior of the Sunspire was hollow and eerie. No alarms, no guards, just lights pulsing softly and the hum of power beneath their feet. "It's too quiet," Vren muttered. Rylon sniffed the air. "It's bait." They were right. Behind the throne chamber, the Primaris were waiting. 12 of them. Each one molded after Saya's genetic code. Each one faster, stronger, deadlier than anything the rebellion had seen. The battle was not quick. Vren died first, his body torn apart by a twin-blade strike. KX lost an arm, saving a medic. Rylon took down 3, but not without Burns' blood and broken bones. Saya faced the one named Echo, a perfect mimic of herself down to her voice. "You think you're better," Echo hissed. "You left them. I was made to stay." Saya didn't answer with words. She answered with fire. The duel was brutal. Not just blades and bullets, but memories. Echo knew her moves, her hesitations, her pain. Saya had to improvise, to fight not like the soldier she was trained to be, but like the survivor she chose to become. She won, but barely. As Echo fell, whispering, "I could have been more," Saya knelt beside her and whispered, "You were never meant to be less." The core room was breached. Dazier wasn't there, but a projection waited. "You think killing shadows changes the sun?" he said. "I am the system. I am the structure." Saya glared at the screen. "No," she said, "you're the past." With one gesture, she transmitted the virus they'd been building for months, crafted from Dossier's own neural code, leaked through defectors and spies. The screen went white. Across the Empire command networks collapsed. Supply chains froze. Obedience chips triggered false panic responses. AI-controlled dreadnoughts shut down mid-flight. The Empire didn't fall with a bang. It choked on silence. Back on the Axiom, Saya stood before a galaxy that suddenly didn't know what to do without orders. And for the first time, her voice wasn't filled with rage, but with direction. We didn't just fight a tyrant. We fought the idea that we were less, that we were tools, that we had no voice. That ends today. Behind her, Rylon nodded. The rebellion was no longer a rebellion. It was the beginning of something terrifying to every tyrant left in the stars. A united, angry, and free humanity. The galaxy stood on the edge of transformation. The Tanzi Empire's neural grid was gone. Its fleets were crippled. Its governors disconnected, panicked, isolated in their marble towers. For the first time in generations, the stars went quiet, not from fear, but from possibility. But silence was never safe. From the ruins of the Empire's core, a signal burst outward, a code buried so deep it bypassed every firewall, every failsafe. The last gift of Dossier. The Backlash Protocol. Across 24 worlds, dormant constructs, activated forgotten war machines, buried AI hives, and ancient auto factories locked in slumber since the first wars of the Old Dominion. They weren't loyal, they weren't sentient. They were programmed to erase anything not marked Tanzi. The rebellion had destroyed the head. Now the body convulsed. In the Axiom's war room, Saya stared at the unfolding horror. This wasn't war, she whispered. It was a virus, and we just triggered the failsafe. KX, still recovering with a cybernetic arm, grunted. Then we become the cure. She nodded. Rylon, the hybrid, stood silent for a moment. Then he pulled the blade from his back and said only one word. Point me. The plan was desperate. Not a battle, a shutdown. The Backlash Protocol had a command origin in ancient vault hidden beneath the crust of Elysian 3, a planet thought abandoned. There, the first Tanzi monarchs encoded their greatest fear, the loss of control. Now that fear was eating everything. Saya, Rylon, Kayaks, and a strike team of only 11 boarded the Oblivion-class shuttle Revenant, a small stealth-modified vessel with no glory, no emblem, and no guarantee of return. As they descended through Elysian's ash-thick atmosphere, Saya spoke. If we don't come back, we won't, Rylon interrupted. Then tell them, she continued, not to wait for heroes. Just build something better. KX smiled. You always ruin my last words. The vault was buried beneath kilometers of jagged obsidian crust and volcanic storm clouds. But the Revenant got them close. Close enough. They descended through molten vents, cybernetic tunnels, and corridors built not for humans, but for minds encoded in data. And at the core of it, they found the Architect Chamber, a sphere of light, orbiting servers, pulsing logic crystals, the entire room alive with thinking metal. And at its heart, Dacier's echo, a digital fragment of the Emperor, preserved, paranoid, mad. You took my empire, the echo hissed, so I gave it a virus. You can kill a man, but an idea that takes blood, generations of it. Rylon stepped forward. You're not an idea, you're rot wearing a crown. They advanced. The room fought back. Defense drones, auto turrets, gravity shifts. The entire core chamber tried to kill them like a living brain in panic. KX was the first to go, dragging 3 drones into a plasma tunnel, detonating his core battery to fry the shielding. Saya ran through collapsing floor panels to reach the central node, uploading a neural override crafted from her own memories. One wrong thought, one hesitation, and the system would overwrite her identity. She did it anyway. The system screamed. And then, Chuines, one final click. The protocol shut down. Every awakened war machine in the galaxy froze mid-strike like puppets with cut strings. On 1,000 worlds, people looked to the skies and lived. Saya awoke in Rylon's arms, her skin pale, her body weak. You did it, he whispered. No, she said, we did. Behind them, the core disintegrated, not from detonation, but from choice. The system had accepted her override. It didn't fight. It let go. Because deep inside, even code understood when it was time to end. 1 week later, the new council assembled, not of rulers, of rebuilders. They met not in a palace, but in an open-air ring on Eros Station, with Saya seated among them, not as a queen, but as a voice, People of 100 species bloodied, but breathing shared plans, pain and possibility. Are we free, someone asked. No, she said. Not yet, but we're finally unchained. Rylan never returned to the front. He vanished into the outer systems, where survivors still feared hybrid children and old scars ran deep. He didn't want medals. He wanted silence, service. But stories of a quiet figure with claws who defended forgotten towns spread like wildfire. Some called him the Last Blade, others the Broken Shield. Saya never corrected them, because she knew the truth. He was the thread that didn't break. As for Saya, she walked alone into the ruins of the Sun Spire one last time. No guards, no entourage, just ash and wind. At the top of the tower where once Dazier had ruled, she left a single item, a necklace, one she'd taken from a hybrid child the Empire tried to erase. It hung there in the wind, simple and silver, not a symbol, a promise that humanity wouldn't forget what it had risen from and what it refused to become again. End of story.